Welcome to Creepy, the best horror storyteller on YouTube.
Beep, beep, beep. The alarm clock hammered into Frank's ears until he reached over and shut it off. Frank groaned, realizing it was time to get up and start another day of school. Frank wished he could just lay there and sleep until noon, but Frank's phone began to ring. "God damn it," Frank mumbled. Frank reached over and grabbed his phone. "Hello," Frank answered. "Hey douches, are you up yet?" On the other line was Frank's best friend, Chris. "How the hell am I going to answer the phone if I'm not awake, ass monkey?" Frank snapped back. "Well, get dressed and get your stank ass over here and pick me up. I got some fun shit planned for tonight." Chris replied. "Like what?" Frank asked. "You'll see," Chris said and hung up. Frank groaned and rolled out of bed to get dressed. Frank slipped on a pair of jeans and pulled his Pink Floyd shirt over his head to get the day started. Frank was a junior at Richmond University. Frank did not like the dorm atmosphere, so he decided to rent out an apartment about 10 miles from the campus. Frank was 22 years old and lived life to the fullest. He drank, he smoked, he partied, and he did everything the average college student would do. The thought of Chris's plan had Frank wondering what Chris has come up with. It was the weekend of Halloween when Frank and his group of friends always did something fun, stupid, and sometimes downright dangerous on Halloween weekend. Last year, Chris wanted to get revenge on the grumpy old man who owned the farm at the edge of town and had the brilliant idea to sneak into the farm and eat shit into all the cows. By the time they reached the area where the cows were held, the old man had stormed out onto his front porch and began blasting away with his shotgun. Luckily, nobody was hurt, and they got away safely. The year before that, they all decided to go to the old cemetery and party and get drunk. Halfway through the night, their friend Boner, his real name was David, but everyone called him Boner because he had a problem with having random erections during class in high school, went through a half a bottle of Jack and was hammered drunk trying to pose on top of the grave plots. Boner thought he was lighter than air, but quickly realized he wasn't when the grave plot beneath him broke. The smart thing to do would have been to leave right away, but they had too many hits from the pipe and decided to still party. Eventually, the cops came, and they were all charged with vandalism and public intoxication. Frank laughed a little at the thought of Boner striking a pose on the grave plot and watching it give way, sending his drunken ass to the ground. Frank took a quick look in the mirror, grabbed his keys, and headed out the door. "So what's this big plan you got for tonight, Chris?" Frank asked, munching away on a hamburger. Frank and his friends were sitting in the school lunchroom discussing their plans for tonight. There were 6 friends in the group. There was Frank, the popular cool guy that got along with everyone. There was Chris, the class clown that has ruffled a lot of feathers over the years with all the pranks he has pulled. Boner was always the one getting himself into the most embarrassing situations, and there was also Mike, who was pretty much always high. Lisa was the head cheerleader at Richmond and had almost every guy wrapped around her finger, and Susan was a bookworm and always got straight A's, but you would have never guessed she was by the way she drank. At a glance, it would appear they all have nothing in common and would never be hanging out with each other, but they were the best of friends. "We better not get shot at again this year, Chris," Lisa snapped. "Put a lid on your snatch, and I'll tell you," Chris barked back. "Okay, so check this out. I found this article online about this house. It looks like it has been abandoned for years, so I figured this would be the perfect place to get tourists this year." "Gee, Chris, I thought you would come up with something cooler than that." Boner interrupted. "Hey, your job is to get caught jerking off in the men's bathroom, not interrupting me," Chris shot back. Boner gave a nervous laugh but kept quiet after that. "Anyways, I did a little research, and it turns out that some sickest crazy shit went down in this house," Chris said. "What kind of shit?" Mike asked. "Well, it turns out back in the 80s, the guy that owned this house was into some satanic shit, and he would lure people to his house and perform all these rituals on these people and start pulling off body parts while they were still alive. Also, once the police got word that this was happening, they ambushed the house only to find out the guy behind all the killings had already fled, and he was never caught. The guy was a crazy fucker." "Chris, only your dumbass would believe that something this ridiculous actually happened," Susan commented. "I'm serious, this shit is legit. I found it on a really reliable website." and there has been multiple reports of missing people, and the last place these people were supposed to be at was this house, fuckers. So what do you say, pussies? Are you in or out? Chris said. Frank looked around the table to see everyone's reaction. Chris had a huge grin on his face. Boner and Susan looked nervous. Lisa was checking her makeup, and Mike was building a fort with a hamburger stoned out of his mind. Fuck it, why not? Frank finally answered. That's the spirit, Frankie boy. Come on, guys, this could be the best Halloween shindig we have ever had, Chris stated. After a while, the group all agreed to meet tonight to explore the house. So where the hell is this place at? Frank asked the group. The 6 friends all met up and drove together in Boner's van. It's past the old shoe factor out in the country, Chris said. Oh great, we're visiting some psycho's house that's miles away from civilization, Boner replied nervously. Oh, calm down, Boner. If any killer attacks us, you can fight them off with your little pecker, Chris joked. The 6 friends brought their supplies to party with. A bottle of Jack Daniels, a bottle of Southern Comfort, a 24-pack of Budweiser, a 24-pack of Coors, and a bag of Pineapple Kush. Mike sat in the back of the van rolling a joint while Susan did a little more research on the house they were going to be partying at on her laptop. Guys, listen to this article about that house I found. The legend of Demon House has been told for decades. According to legend, Bill LaMadu was the owner of the property off of County Line Road. Bill lived by himself, and it was reported that Bill practiced satanic acts inside the household. Legend has it Bill started off torturing and killing small animals, but soon grew bored of this and needed more excitement to fill his sick head. Bill began posting flyers around town stating that he was selling some of the best sweet corn in town to lure victims into his house. Once inside, Bill proceeded to kill the townspeople one by one. Bill did not want his fun to end, so legend states that Bill offered his soul to the devil and promised to take care of the devil's dirty work in exchange for eternal life. Reports show that no bodies were ever found inside the LaMadu residence, but there have been multiple missing person reports that state the last place they planned on going was to Bill's house. Some say police covered it all up so the story wouldn't spread. Some say it's all a big hoax to increase tourists, and some just don't know if the legend of Bill LaMadu really does exist. See, I told you guys it was true, Chris said while inhaling the joint Mike had rolled. Chris, you have to be the dumbest person alive if you really believe that stupid story. Hey, blow me. This is going to be legendary. Chris shot back. Well, we're about to find out if the legend is real or not because we're here, Boner said, interrupting the argument. Boner, have I ever told you how gay you were for buying a van? Chris said before exiting the van. The house was enormous. The house stood at 3 stories tall. All of the windows were boarded up, and it looked like nobody had worked on the property in 30 years. Oh my god, this house is so disgusting. I don't want to be partying with a bunch of rats and cockroaches, Lisa said, disgusted. Don't worry, Sugar Tits will protect you, Chris replied and slapped her ass while walking past carrying the beer inside. The 6 friends all stood on the porch as if waiting for an invitation to go inside. Mike tried to open the door, but it was locked. From behind, Frank moved Mike aside and kicked in the door. Frank smiled and walked inside. Inside was pitch black. Hey, Boner, give me a flashlight, Frank called over his shoulder. Inside the house was full of cobwebs, but other than that it was somewhat clean. Frank led the way inside as the group trailed behind him. The group decided to set up inside a large room to the far left, which appeared to be the living room at one point. There was an old fireplace at the end of the room that was full of cobwebs. There was also 2 couches in the room, but other than that it was empty. Boner brought a backpack full of candles because they knew there would be no electricity. Boner began lighting the candles and placing them around the room. All right, guys, let's get this party started, Chris said, excited. Frank began handing out beers while Mike proceeded to roll another joint. Susan pulled the Jack Daniels and shot glasses and poured everyone a shot. After about an hour of drinking and chatting, Chris decided that it was time to go explore the house. Hand me one of those flashlights. I'm going to go find Bill and see if he wants a hand job from Lisa, Chris said, then followed with a loud burp. Frank jumped up and followed Chris out the room, and the others stubbornly followed. Chris led the way down a hallway. At the end of a hallway was a small staircase that led down to a basement. Down in the basement, Chris immediately began rummaging through all the cabinets to see if he could find anything of interest. After looking through all the cabinets, Chris was unable to find anything worthy of bragging about. God damn it, not one skull or bone or anything cool, Chris said angrily. You're a sick freak, Chris, Lisa said. The group began looking around the other rooms to see if they could find anything of importance. After a little while of exploring, Mike screamed from the other room. Holy fucking shit, guys, check this out. The group ran into the room Mike was in, where Mike was holding what appeared to be a jar that was full of multiple similar objects. Are those fucking teeth? Susan shrieked. Betsa we're getting the fuck out of here now, Boner said, walking towards the stairs. Chris stepped in his way and said, Come on, Boner, don't be such a pussy. I'm sure those are fake and someone just planted them to. Before Chris could finish his sentence, they all heard a loud thud from upstairs, followed by a few more thuds, then silence. What the fuck was that? Frank whispered. They all stood in silence to see if they could hear anything else, but nothing. Come, let's go check it out, Chris said, walking up the stairs. The group followed him as they slowly walked up the stairs. The group filed back into the living room. They looked around to see if anything was different from when they left the room, but everything appeared to be the same. Chris made his way into the center of the house, where there was a large staircase that led upstairs. I'm going to go check upstairs real quick, Chris said. Chris, that's not such a good idea, Susan whimpered. Don't worry, I'm just going to go to the top of the stairs to see if I see anything, Chris replied. Chris slowly began walking up the stairs one at a time. Halfway up the stairs, another thud came from upstairs. Chris froze to see if anything moved, but nothing. Chris continued up the stairs, and when he reached the top, he shined the flashlight at a door he thought he heard the noise from. After a few seconds, Chris was about to take his flashlight off the door, but all of a sudden a giant rat bolted from wall and ran down the hallway. Chris yelled, but then laughed soon after. He turned around to face his friends at the bottom of the stairs. It was just a stupid rat that was making the noise, you giant vaginas. As soon as Chris finished his sentence, the friends watched in horror as they saw a giant figure slowly step out of the darkness and into the faint light that glowed from the candles. Frank screamed for Chris to watch out, but before Chris could do anything, he was met with an axe to the back of the neck. The friends could only watch in shock and disbelief as they watched Chris's head roll down the stairs and come to a stop at the edge of their feet. Everyone screamed at the sight of watching their best friend murdered. The group watched as a giant man stepped more into the light. The man was huge, standing at least 7 foot tall and easily weighed over 300 pounds. The man was not muscular or fat, he was just enormous. He wore no shirt, just a pair of dirty, torn overalls. His face was covered with what appeared to be a pale gray mask with an evil painted-on grin. The mask wasn't an ordinary one, it looked as if the mask was stitched into the man's head. Frank and the others bolted to the front door only to find that it had been chained and padlocked. Frantically, the group ran down the hallway trying to find a place to hide or escape the clutches of this evil man. Frank, Susan, and Mike led the way with Lisa and Boner trailing behind. They rounded the corner, and before they could go any further, the floor gave way and Frank, Susan, and Mike fell through, crashing down into the room below. Boner stood at the edge peering down with Lisa standing behind holding him tight. Are you guys okay? Boner asked. Yeah, I think so. Guys, hurry up and jump down here, Frank replied back. Boner let Lisa go first. He helped lower her down as Frank grabbed her from the waist and assisted her to the ground. Frank looked back up to see if Boner had started his climb down, only to see Bill towering over Boner with his axe raised high in the air. Before Frank could warn Boner, Bill swung his axe down right on top of Boner's head. The axe drove all the way down to Boner's groin, splitting him completely in two. Blood splattered on the friends as they helplessly watched Boner's body split in two, and each side of him falling to the ground in opposite directions. Frank didn't waste any more time as he motioned for everyone to keep moving forward to get away from this ogre-like creature. The 4 friends ran as fast as they could, try not to bump into any walls until they knew Bill was not right behind them. Guys, wait, Mike called out to the others out of breath. I don't think he is chasing us. The friends stopped and realized their friend was right. What the fuck are we going to do, Frank? Susan shrieked. Frank pulled out a Zippo, trying to see where they were with the little light he had to work with. "I don't know," Frank replied back. "I just know that we need to get the foo." Frank stopped mid-sentence as they heard footsteps from the ceiling above. Frank placed a finger on his lips, motioning for everyone to not make a sound. The giant footsteps sounded like bowling balls being dropped with each step Bill took. The friends stood frozen in fright, making sure not to make a peep. The footsteps sounded as if they were moving on until Susan sneezed and the footsteps froze in their tracks. Frank looked at Susan in horror, knowing that she very well may have sealed their fate. They all stood still once again for what felt like an eternity until they came to the conclusion that Bill was no longer hovering above them. "I can't believe you almost got us caught, Susan," Lisa quietly yelled at Susan. Before Susan could reply, a spear drove through the ceiling and plunged deep into Mike's head. "Oh my God, no!" Susan screamed. Frank grabbed the girls and pushed them forward as they frantically ran down the hallway until they came to a room which eerily resembled a dungeon. The gang took a minute to catch their breath. "We have got to get out of this place," Frank said, still breathing hard. "Going out the front door is useless, but there has to be a back door or a window that we can get out of." Frank pulled out his Zippo again to explore the room in hopes of some kind of escape. The room they were in was musty, and dead bugs littered the stone floor, and it didn't appear that the room led anywhere. Frank scanned through the room as best he could through the darkness until his eyes focused on a plain wooden door. "Guys, I think I found a way out." Frank rushed to the door and practically ripped the door off its hinges to get the door open. Frank was expecting to see a path to a way out, but was quickly surprised when a flood of human skulls and bones poured out from the closet and surrounded their feet. Frank placed his hand over Susan's mouth to keep her from screaming. Frank, disappointed, felt that was their only hope until he noticed a small trap door in the back of the closet. "Yes, we still have hope," Frank cried. Before the kids could make a clearing to the trap door, a thunderous crash from the hallway filled the room. "Oh fuck, oh fuck, oh fuck, we're going to die," Lisa cried out. The friends looked around the room for anything they could use to defend themselves, and to the friends' advantage, there was several gallons of gasoline on the top shelf of the closet they had just opened. Without wasting a second, Frank grabbed 2 cans of gas and poured them both on the floor at the entrance of the room. The girls removed the skulls and bones to make a path for the door and finally were able to get the door open. "Just go, I'll catch up with you," Frank yelled at the girls. The girls disappeared down the trap door as Frank waited for Bill. Soon after the girls left, Bill's massive frame filled the doorway. Bill had his axe clenched tight as he took a step forward, stepping right in the puddle of gasoline. "Hey bitch, suck on fire," Frank screamed at Bill while lighting the Zippo and throwing it into the gasoline on the floor. Bill could do nothing but watch the Zippo land on the gas, and immediately flames began to dance around his legs, catching his pants on fire. Frank watched as Bill kicked his legs, trying to get the flames off of him, but it was no use. The fire was spreading too quickly. Frank knew his time was limited before the entire room would be engulfed in flames, so he bolted to the trapdoor and jumped down. The passageway was too small, so Frank had to crawl. He didn't know where he was going, he just knew he needed to get there fast. Frank crawled and crawled until he hit a dead end. He looked up and saw another trapdoor, and he could see what appeared to be light from the sunrise. Frank stood up and removed the thin piece of wood that was covering the hole and crawled out of the tunnel. As soon as he crawled out, he realized he was outside in what looked like the backyard of the house. Lisa and Susan flung themselves onto Frank and wouldn't let go for the longest time. The 3 stood up and stared at the house where 3 of their best friends were murdered. Frank tried to hold back tears, but a strong odor quickly halted any actions of crying. "Hey Lisa, did you fart?" Frank asked. "Oh, shut up, I'm in no mood for jokes now. No, I'm serious, it smells like someone blew ass or sulfur." At that point, Lisa and Susan could smell it too. They all slowly spun around and saw something they never wanted to see again. Bill towered over the 3, still clenching his axe tightly. The fire damage did not go unnoticed as his legs and torso were charred and black. Also, his mask was no longer there. Instead, his face appeared before them. His eyes glowed a demonic red, and the skin on face was a fleshy mess, and his skull was visible in some areas. The three screamed, but their screams were not loud enough to stop the raised axe to come swooping down and chopping off all three of their heads at once.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more similar horror stories.